Welcome to the Vault of Lost Tales podcast.
Okay, let's think about Rudyard Kipling. Late 19th, early 20th century. I mean, the man was a literary phenomenon.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Henry James even called him a complete man of genius. Quite the endorsement.
Right. And then 1907, Nobel Prize for Literature. First English language writer to get it.
And the youngest at the time, only 41? That's pretty remarkable.
It really is. So today, we're not just, listing achievements. We want to dig a bit deeper.
Yeah, we're exploring how Kipling's life, his own story from beginning to end, might have actually woven its way into his fiction.
We've got some good sources, his background info, discussions about his work and its legacy. We're trying to see if we can trace those threads.
Exactly. It's about looking at the person behind the pages, the experiences that might have fueled that imagination. So let's start where it all began.
Okay. Joseph Rudyard Kipling, born December 30th, 1865. And the place is key. Bombay Presidency, British India.
And the sources really stresses that birthplace inspired much of his work.
It wasn't just a location, was it? It was his whole early world. India was baked into his perspective from the start.
Definitely. His parents, John Lockwood Kipling and Alice MacDonald, they were there too. It was the family environment.
So this early immersion, it gave him this incredible wellspring of images, sounds, stories.
You see it pop up again and again in his writing. It wasn't a footnote. It was foundational.
And then his career just takes off. He really hit the ground running.
Unbelievably prolific, especially early on. You think about The Jungle Book, The Day's Work, Captain's Courageous, the poetry in the Seven Seas, all within about 4 years.
Wow. That's intense creative output.
This is just someone just bursting with stories they needed to tell, right?
Yeah.
And apparently he really loved writing the Jungle Books.
Yeah, I read he even wrote back and forth with kids about them.
Which shows that connection, that desire to share these worlds he was building, many rooted right back in India.
But not everything he wrote got a standing ovation. There was controversy.
Oh, definitely. Especially around poems like Recessional, that was 1897, and The White Man's Burden in 1899.
Those stir things up quite a bit. The sources show really different takes on them.
Exactly. Some people saw them as, rallying cries for the British Empire, a sense of duty.
The white man's burden? Lines like, take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. It sounds pretty clear-cut in supporting that idea.
It does articulate that view, the idea of a civilizing mission. But then you look at Recessional.
Which has a very different feel.
Right. Far called, our navies melt away. On dune and headland sinks the fire. Lo, all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nineveh and Tyre. That sounds more like a warning.
A warning about empires falling, about hubris, maybe?
Perhaps. It suggests things aren't permanent, that power fades. So it's complex, not just simple propaganda, maybe a reflection of the era's anxieties, too.
It's that complexity that keeps people debating him, I suppose. Okay, let's shift to his life's timeline a bit. He lived in New England for a while.
Yep. And then moved back to England, to Torquay in Devon, around September 1896.
Apparently didn't love the house there. Found it a bit gloomy.
Yeah, that's what one source says. But interestingly, he kept writing, churning out work.
So maybe the surroundings weren't the main driver, it was more internal.
Could be. It suggests that creative engine was running regardless. But he didn't stay put entirely.
No, he had those annual winter trips to South Africa.
Right, from 1898 to 1908, he often stayed with Cecil Rhodes, a major figure in empire building.
That's significant. Direct contact with the architects of empire.
And he wasn't just visiting socially. During the Second Boer War, he actually worked as a correspondent for a newspaper called The Friend.
So he was right there reporting on an imperial conflict.
He saw it up close, that kind of first-hand experience.
Yeah.
Well, I have to assume it seeped into his writing somehow.
Giving him maybe a grittier perspective? Or maybe reinforcing his views? Hard to say for sure.
It likely added layers, realism, maybe even some disillusionment later on. He saw the mechanics of it all.
Then comes a really tough moment. 1899. He's visiting the U.S.
Yes, a terrible time. He and his daughter, Josephine, both got pneumonia.
And tragically, Josephine didn't survive.
Awful, a profound loss. And our sources hint that this might have shifted his creative focus afterwards.
How so? What did he write soon after that?
Well, he really concentrated on Just So Stories for Little Children, which came out in 1902, and Kim, published in 1901.
Just So Stories. Writing for children after losing a child, that feels significant.
It does, doesn't it? Maybe a way to reconnect with childhood or find some solace. And Kim, too, with its big themes of searching for identity, belonging, loss.
You can definitely see how personal grief might echo in those themes. It's hard not to draw that line, even tentatively.
It certainly makes you think about how personal pain might shape artistic choices.
Also around that time, 1900, he apparently reacted very strongly against Kaiser Wilhelm II's Hun speech.
Yeah, he was quite offended. Which shows he had strong political and moral convictions he wasn't afraid to voice.
He stayed active later in life too, didn't he? Scripting the first royal Christmas broadcast.
He did in 1932, and wrote a story about Shakespeare in 1934. Still engaged, still writing.
Until his death in 1936, January 18th, he was 70.
Yeah, the end came relatively suddenly. A hemorrhage, complications from a perforated duodenal ulcer. He had surgery but didn't make it.
Not exactly a quiet fading away.
No, but his final resting place. Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. That says a lot about his stature, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It seals his place in the literary canon. I love that story about the magazine reporting his death too early.
Oh, right. His response was perfect Kipling, wasn't it? I've just read that I am dead. Don't forget to delete me from your list of subscribers.
Shows that wit was there right till the end.
It does. And, even critics who wrestle with his legacy, like T.S. Eliot, acknowledged his technical skill. Eliot called him a great verse writer, especially praising the Barrack Room Ballads.
Said his position was unique. High praise.
Indeed. But we can't ignore the controversies that still swirl around him.
No, the accusations of imperialism, racism. They're a significant part of his legacy, too. Things like his views on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and Colonel Dyer.
Right. There's debate there, of course.
Yeah.
Some argue his views were more nuanced or less extreme than sometimes portrayed, but the association with imperial attitudes is undeniable and problematic for many readers today.
Even in India, views are mixed. Some critics are harsh, while others, like Nehru apparently, found value in parts of his writing.
It's a complex legacy.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that idea of life-influencing work. Let's use The Mark of the Beast as a sort of case study.
Okay. A story set in British India, his home turf. What's the connection here?
Well, the whole setup, right? East of Suez, where things operate differently, where local beliefs have real power. That comes directly from his experience.
And the plot centers on an Englishman, Fleet, who does something incredibly disrespectful.
Exactly. He mocks a local idol, Hanuman, and gets, well, cursed. He starts behaving like an animal.
Could Fleet's arrogance be seen as sort of a reflection of that colonial mindset Kipling himself was sometimes accused of? Or maybe a critique of it?
It's definitely possible to read it that way. Whether Kipling intended it as critique or just observation is debatable, but the dynamic is there. The clash between dismissive colonial attitudes and the power of local tradition.
And the transformation Fleet undergoes, it's grotesque. Physical, psychological, it's horrific.
It really is. And you wonder, you mentioned the death of his daughter Josephine from illness. Now, this story was written before that specific tragedy.
Yes, important timing.
But Kipling certainly knew illness, saw suffering in India, the ever-present threat of disease. Think about the silver man in the story, the leper.
Right, disease is very present.
So could his general awareness of bodily vulnerability, of how life can change drastically and horribly, inform this kind of story? Maybe this exploration of transformation resonated with anxieties he already had.
It feels plausible. It's not a direct link to Josephine, but maybe part of a broader theme about the fragility of normalcy, of the human form itself.
Perhaps. And the story explicitly talks about the power of the gods and devils of Asia. It's not subtle.
No, it shows he was tuned into those belief systems, didn't just dismiss them out of hand, even as part of the ruling class.
It seems he recognized their power, at least within the world of the story. It's about the consequences of ignoring or mocking something deeply culturally ingrained. The Westerner pays a heavy price.
So wrapping this up then, it feels like Kipling's life is deeply entangled with his work. His Indian childhood, his travels, the Boer War, personal losses like Josephine.
Yeah, it all seems to be in the mix. It doesn't necessarily make interpreting him easier. Sometimes it makes it more complicated, more fraught, especially with the imperial context.
But understanding that background, the life lived, it adds layers, doesn't it? It gives you a richer context for reading stories like The Mark of the Beast.
Absolutely. It reminds you, these stories didn't just spring out of nowhere. They came from a specific person, living in a specific time, experiencing specific things.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe for everyone listening. How does knowing this about Kipling, or any author really, change how you read their work?
Does digging into the biography deepen your understanding? Does it complicate it? Does it change how you feel about fiction that comes from, let's say, a potentially problematic historical viewpoint?
Something to mull over next time you pick up a classic, perhaps. It definitely adds another dimension to the reading experience.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.